What is Guild Wars 2's 10th profession? What could they possibly release that hasn't already been done? I toyed around with this idea for a while, and I believe I came up with some pretty great ideas of what this mystery class could be. To make sure that I'm keeping up with the lore and within the theme of the game, I sat down and had a conversation with AstraLegend, one of the most knowledgeable people I know on Guild Wars 1 and 2, to see what we can make the most sense in discovering a new profession. Now, as a note, these are just all thoughts, ideas, if you will. ArenaNet has not announced that a new profession is on its way, but with a lot of the recent changes as far as content releases are concerned, they could potentially see some type of 10th profession idea come to fruition. Before we get started, comment down below on your best guess of what a 10th profession could be here in Guild Wars 2. Let's get started. All right, so Astral here is arguably the bastion of knowledge. We're talking Guild Wars 2 knowledge. We're talking everything that I have ever had a question about. This man absolutely knows.
I don't know that I know that much, to be honest. I am just a very, very fast wikier. So I've just been around for forever and ever. I love helping people out. So that was always my goal, was to learn about the game that I love and be able to share that knowledge with others to help them on their journey, be it short or long, here in Tyria.
The main reason that I wanted to talk to you is to leverage your knowledge to speculate about what the 10th profession could potentially be for Guild Wars 2. And I know there's a lot of caveats, and we will get to them, I promise, but opinion of what a 10th profession could look like in Guild Wars 2.
So I wanted to dive into like classic D&D professions, right? Classic fantasy legends, to see what we're missing. So I did my research, and there's not a lot. There's most of what is around, if you look at like the D&D handbook or other fantasy genres, most of what is around is encompassed at least in some form here in Guild Wars 2 already. There's a handful of things, so I'm going to float some ideas, maybe some new weapons that I would like to see eventually.
Absolutely,
as
yeah.
Some classes here. So a handful of ideas that I didn't flesh out too hard. While we do have Mesmer, which deals a lot in illusion magic, we don't have a lot that necessarily deals directly in mind magic, as in like telekinesis and a lot of psionic powers. So I would love to see some sort of light class if we're getting a fourth class of each weight, let's say, I would love to see a light one that deals with telekinesis, lifting objects, throwing enemies around, lots of crowd control, mind-based powers, right, within its illusion magic.
And I was even going to point out, and also the Virtuoso, which is psionic in and of themselves, to these psychic blades, so to speak. But I think that would be cool, because it's like almost, in a sense, messing with kinetic energy. You're messing with these almost like, it's kind of like a primal force of messing with either gravity or something of that idea. But then, of course, you know, if you look at like the Chronomancer, I think their elite, if I remember correctly, their elite is a gravity well. So there you go. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the Mesmer. It does take that a little bit. I see what your point is.
Yeah, and I would love to see a bigger separation, though. If they were to add this as a class, I'd love to see a bigger separation between the two. Maybe stripping a few of the Mesmer skills that deal more in this and applying it to the fourth light class. And really diving into the illusion side of things on Mesmer. I'd love to see a spec that runs a large clone, like just one single clone that can do as much as the player. Maybe so much as swapping control over the two and practically playing two characters at once. But really diving into the illusion side of things more so than the telekinetic powers, where we could put which we could put on this fourth class.
See, and I actually kind of like that idea. I like that idea of almost. Because that was something that I was like toying the idea of. I wouldn't say it's like a twin mage, but like similar to the way that the Revenant dances between the two stances while they're in combat, where you have a phased kind of like, almost, let me put it as like, if you're familiar with World of Warcraft, the way that the Balanced Druid plays, where they have the solar and lunar phases, and it's a constantly shifting kind of back and forth timer. So you enter into the lunar phase, and then as you're casting spells, you do more lunar damage, and then you have no control over of how that is swapping back and forth. You can only react to that as that energy bar is bouncing back and forth.
I don't know that that would fit super well in Guild Wars, to be honest, because it reminds me of the new Alliance stance for Revenant, right? You have the two different
Exactly,
sides of
yeah.
it. You have the healing and the damage side that you have to play around. And when it originally released, you had to use the skills in order while also balancing the energy for the class, right? So what I mean by that is that if you use the Luxin side healing skill, it would then flip to the Kurzik side healing skill, and you weren't able to use the Luxin version of it until you first used the Kurzik side. And the community really didn't like it. Not having control over which skills you were using was not well received. I don't want to completely shoot down your idea. I
No,
really
no,
like the
no.
dichotomy idea. That was another thought that I had, is light and dark magic, and having some sort of some sort of class that could play off of light and dark magic. Because while we do have some light magic from Guardian, and we have maybe some dark from like Necromancer, or maybe on Spectre for Thief, it would be cool to see that light and dark magic really become fleshed out within a single class.
Because I actually like this idea. You said it was like a light and dark mage?
Yeah, I always like the idea of the powers of light, especially. And I think it's something that MMOs in general haven't done super well with. Like, say, a light class, a caster that is based solely around light, possibly hard light constructs similar to maybe Hollowsmith, Judgment Rays coming down. Guardian has some of it. Like I said, Hollowsmith has some of the hard light stuff going on with it, but really focusing around the magic light things. And I think it could play really well into the lore, given that Aurene has kind of become the Dragon of Light, right? She's the prismatic one that fragments all leyline energy. They've compared it to light several times. So I think it would be really neat to see something based around that, and then possibly go into the dichotomy of both light and dark, right? Play it like in most other classes where you can choose your utility skills that you want. So you can mix up these light and dark abilities as you see fit. But it'd be really cool, in my opinion, to see that kind of gameplay come in, or that kind of magic come into play, and use the ley lines and maybe Aurene's power kind of hone in on this magic light.
Oh, absolutely. Like it almost makes me think of, and again, I base it off of my World of Warcraft experience, kind of like the Shadow Priest. The Shadow Priest now essentially has the same shadow form that the Spectre has.
Okay.
And that's their primary damage dealer. So they're in their range DPS. They're in there. But they can switch out of the shadow form, cast holy spells. You can't cast holy spells or light spells while you are in the shadow form, which makes sense because it's kind of like combative. Jump in and out if they need to, and you would see it more often in like PvP if they needed to heal or if they needed to dispel, because that was something that you couldn't do. I actually like that kind of like bouncing back and forth too. And again, it's kind of it's along that lines of having like and utilizing the spells of light and dark, because it makes me almost think of like Moira, I think is
Moira.
yeah.
That's who just popped into my head too. Yeah. We use the the kind of light side to heal and the dark side to damage.
And then like her ult is like this like giant ray cannon that's basically the Hollowsmith ability, we'll say, a channeled ability, which I think is just like that would be something really cool, is to actually expand on the Norn racial abilities and having a class called the Shapeshifter. Like that.
Dang it! I had the same idea.
Did you?
This was one of my other ones. Oh,
it would work so perfectly well, and there would have to be some type of lore tie to shapeshifters and things like that, something with the Norn heritage, maybe, I don't know, a essential like a shapeshifter that's able to dance in and around of these different forms to better suit certain styles of combat, and not to like parry off of the druid off of the ranger, but almost being able to become like one of the O cards where you're able to almost like support allies, offer some healing. You could do bear stance, you become a bear, you're very defensive, or even like heck, you could even do like a siege turtle, like maybe not without the cannon, but like the turtle stance. And it almost kind of reminds me of like Udyr from League of Legends, where it has eternal, phoenix, bear, tiger, and then you have like, and again I bring World of Warcraft because like in my opinion the druid, even like the Burning Crusade druid, even the older druids, where you're able to like swap into bear form, into tiger, into tree of life form, and then of course boomkin. You have all these different capabilities. I really think that would be something unique that would just knock the socks off as far as a 10th profession.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really good options here. Yeah, Shapeshifter was one that kind of floated around in my head, because a lot of these forms that you mentioned are already playable in the game, be it through the Norn racial skills. You can transform into the bear, the raven, the leopard, etc. But also in certain heart tasks throughout the core world. If you go to Caledon Forest where the Sylvari start, there's a heart just to the west of where you spawn in, where you become an oak heart. So some of these already have animations and they already have playable forms. It wouldn't be that much of a stretch in my mind, at least, to bring them in as their own class.
Come on, ArenaNet.
Come on, ArenaNet, what you doing?
What other ones do you have?
Okay, so I had a few more. I'm gonna toy around with these next two kind of in a similar way, because they were both classes in Guild Wars 1 that we have seen briefly in Guild Wars 2.
I was waiting for it.
Paragon.
I was waiting for that one. I had that on my list. I was like, we have to talk about this.
They're not my number one, but they're on the list, right? Like, I do think I would love to see them come back. I would love to see Ritualist come back, but I'm not going to talk about Ritualist today. I think that's honestly,
a whole nother video.
I think honestly it would make a better elite spec for Revenant. Channel Master Togo or something and play Ritualist. But Dervish and Paragon, right? So these classes, I think I would like to see Dervish come in more so than Paragon. Paragon's got a lot of skills in Guild Wars 1 that are already used here in Guild Wars 2. They use a lot of shouts, and they're really there to buff allies. That was their primary focus. So we see this a lot already as kind of a mix between Warrior and Guardian, where they have their shouts that buff their allies. There are a few other things that they could focus on, but it's the primary way that they were used in my experience in Guild Wars 1. I think I would much rather see Dervish. I think that there's more to them lore-wise, because their big thing was channeling the gods, right? They could take on these avatar forms of the gods in order to use their powers briefly. So it's somewhat similar to the way Revenant can channel legends of the past, but they were much more focused on using their scythe and imbuing it with the power of the different gods here, right? And we see this a little bit in Guild Wars 2. We saw a handful of them in Path of Fire. They show up as Awakened, and especially if you go to the Twilight Oasis Fractal, you'll see Amala, who is a dervish, as the final boss there, and she actually shows up later in Season 4, Awakened now. In the Fractal specifically, I like to take that as an example. We get to see each of the different god forms that she takes back to back to back very quickly, and you'll see her throw attacks that are based around Balthazar, and then we'll see her summon minions as Melandra's form, and we'll see her throw walls of fear out as Grenth. And I think that could be a really unique class, and they could even bring in other gods as elite specs, right? They could bring in an Abaddon one, which we hadn't seen before with the Dervish class. They could go further into, maybe channel the Elder Dragons and bring in some of those powers. Maybe call in some Jormag one and have a spec that's focused around chilling and CC.
Don't ruin. That's my grand finale. Don't ruin it.
Oh no. Okay, I won't ruin it. But I really think the Dervish should come in, and but none of those are my number one that I think is the most interesting and the most lore-friendly class that they could bring in.
Let's hear it. I'm curious now.
Yeah, so I've kind of been trying to build to this one, and it could be a Dyrinn specific, or it could be on all classes, and that is Golemancer. And this is a class that exists in the world already. We see this on a couple of characters, both in the first game and in this one. Like Zoja. Zoja was a Golemancer. She doesn't fit into any of the other classes because she is Golemancer already. They focus on building golems, and using those to either support their allies or attack their enemies. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mechanist already has a mech. We've already got the robot. We've got something like this.
But that's almost like borrowed power from Jade Tech.
Right. And I think that now that we have Taimi working with Zunlight Jade, we could see some interesting Asuran tech mix in with the Jade tech, right? And get these cool golems. And my thought behind this was your different slot skills that you pick are the pieces to the golem that you build. And casting your elite skill will combine them into one suit that you can either use or have it camp.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Now, I don't think that to keep it fairly distinct from mech, I think we would have to not have it follow you around. It can't be a pet except in its small form, right? So it's either a minion, a set of minions that follow you around, or you combine it and it becomes more like a tower or a turret that can either heavily defend your allies or heavily attack your enemies. You could go into elite specs where different or added new forms for this golem, because we've really only seen 2 forms for golems in the lore already. We have Mark 1 and Mark 2. This could be Mark 3, you know, if you bring in Mark 3 and it starts as pieces, maybe it's nanobots kind of thing, and they combine into a larger mech. I
Almost
think
like really Voltron-esque type thing.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to see them combine and be usable. You can either hop inside and use it as a suit of armor, or depending on the form, it could go on 4 legs and move really quickly, almost as a sort of mount or attack very quickly, kind of like if you go back to World of Warcraft, the druid had its leopard form or tiger form or whatever that attacked more like a thief, or they had their bear form, which was much tankier. This mech could have similar aspects where if you're on 4 legs, it's more like a cat and it's very fast and it attacks quickly but doesn't do as much damage. But I think it'd be really neat to have it follow you around as minions, and then once it's combined, you can either hop inside to keep it moving and use it as your weapon skills, right? Similar to how we see golems in World of Warcraft, or not World of Warcraft, World versus World, excuse me.
Yeah.
Or, get out of it and let it stay stationary and act as a massive turret that does, big damage or big healing or whatever it has to do. Acts as sort of an 11th player.
I like that. I really like that idea, and especially because of the idea of like the capabilities of the minions, and that's being there, of course, the profession mechanic is these different minions. Is that every time that you, or every elite or utility skill that you go ahead and pick, it chooses a specific piece of the of that particular minion, and then the elite, of course, being that combination where it's like you combine all the minions that you have chosen and you get what you get. And it's like there's so many different variations that it's almost in a sense of like combining the 2 weapons for like a dual attack for like a weaver or a thief, where it's like you get combinations based off of the choices that you make. And then when you use it, like you might have this one, like I like the idea of a turret one where it's just big damage, but it's immobile. Or I was even thinking like you could, like a certain combination would be that big mech suit, like that enhances all of your abilities, your main weapon skills, but it blocks all of your utility skills. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, and as you've been speculating on this, it makes me think a little bit more into it. Perhaps depending on the combination, it becomes a suit that you can jump into, or maybe it becomes one that follows you, or maybe it becomes one that stays stationary, but isn't all of them at the same time. That's a really neat idea, and I think that it could play really well into if you pick certain minions / pieces of this golem that deal heavily in condition damage, you could spec into that. If you pick the ones that are good at water fields, and maybe you could combine it with blasting or with other bits that or minions that spin and do whirl finishers that could heal, that kind of thing. Using the combo fields especially could really enhance upon that even further. And then obviously combining them into one would be similar to Mechanist, but I think different enough based on the choices that you made of your utility skills and how it pieces together in a Voltron sense.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome, man. Sign me up. I'm paying money for it. I don't care. Like, yeah. I do have to talk about it because this is the idea. This is the only idea that I've ever really just stuck with, and I thought about and I fleshed out, and I really think that they could do it because I feel like it would flow perfectly with the lore. It wouldn't overstep too much of what everyone else has already done. I do worry that it could overpower some. I'm gonna say, but I mean, every week balance changes and everything's terrible. So my idea for the 10th profession, and it's the best one I could come up with, the Dragon Familiar, that essentially, because the commander has such a tie to Aurene and obviously a main set of the story, and of course she becomes and ascends into the Prismatic Dragon, Ley Energy, all that. I think that it would be a fantastic 10th profession because it doesn't overstep or undercut any of the previous profession. It is a new profession and it meshes with the story perfectly, because now we have some way to channel the prismatic energy, and this particular class is able to summon even further, kind of like the Revenant on the Herald, these echoes of the previous Elder Dragons. So you have like the different specs, the different trait lines, are of the dragons, of the previous dragons. So Primordius is fire and magma and is heavily oriented around condition damage, whereas, Zaitan, which is undeath, might be toughness and defense. And then you could even go into Jormag, could be, frost and control, and Kralkatorrik can of course be like power spike damage, which like there's so many capabilities that they could flow together. Now the only thing I had difficulty putting together was some type of like, how would you do the elite specs? And how would you put that trait line in there? And then I was like, well, we have Suwan, we do have Oreen, and we keep.
Yes, I would argue that Suwan. So to kind of help you flesh out the initial idea here, with the original classes here in Guild Wars 2, the way that the trait lines at least used to work was that each trait line had a specific stat attached to it, right? So you had your power line, you had your precision line, your vitality, your toughness. For like elementalists, you have fire, water, earth, air, and arcane as your base trait lines here, which I believe fire is power, air is precision, earth was toughness, water was vitality, and then arcane was kind of your profession mechanics there. I think going off of these elder dragons here as trait lines, you could probably do Primordius as the power one, or I'd probably go with the power one for Primordius, similar to fire on Ellie. I would probably go Kralkatorrik as precision, be the precision line, which focuses on different criticals, that sort of thing. Suwan would probably be my vitality line, the healing line. And then let's see, who do we have left? Jormag. Jormag might be the toughness line.
I was thinking frost and defense. That's something that could work as well.
Yeah, the colder you are, the harder you get, the tougher you are.
Careful with that line.
Yeah, true. I mean, I said what I said. But yeah, and then you could find a way to slot in Zaitan and Mordremoth as well. Maybe this is the one with six base trait lines, as its unique profession, one of the unique profession mechanics of it.
And that might actually be kind of like, and I didn't want to limit it to being like either the four stances, say attunements for Ellie, or even down to 2 for Revenant as far as jumping back and forth. I actually had the idea of it being whatever 3 trait lines you pick, whatever 3 you choose. So we'll say Jormag, Zaitan, and Kralkatorrik. 1, 2, 3.
Sure.
Those each, similar to how the Revenant has specific utility skills, those 3 have specific weapons tied to them, meaning that you can only use, this is kind of where I ran into an issue, because then it's like, well, then they would basically have to be 2-handed weapons essentially all the way across the board to make sense. But like Jormag being hammer, and then Zaitan being staff, and then Kralkatorrik being critical hits, so you could do like longbow or
Dagger is the person that comes to mind for me. But you could, similar to how Revenant, if you were to go conditions on Revenant, one of your slots is going to be Mace and Axe. They combo the best together when it comes to condition damage. So you could take each Elder Dragon and give them a full 5 weapon skills, be it either a 2-handed, or you give them a main and an offhand. Even Spellbreaker as an elite spec got 2 weapons. They got dual daggers, so they got their five skills in a row there. So I almost want to call this like a heavy class. For some reason, that's what's popping into my head. I think that having focus on more heavy classes, because right now it's only on Guardian, would be neat.
Well, and I think that's kind of like where my thought process you would have to go, is that of course whatever 3 trait lines you have, those are the 3 weapons that you essentially go with. And again, that also calls in the issue. It's like, well, then do they specifically have a third, like weapon slot that is essentially just for cosmetics? Because then if you add that third weapon slot that actually has stats on it, then inherently that class is going to have an edge, and that's going to have to be balanced out somehow.
I would probably limit it just still down to 2 weapon slots, but play it like an elite spec, right? If you're on Deadeye, you can't use staff on Thief. They just don't allow you to. So if you've selected Kralkatorrik, Jormag, and Zaitan, then you can't use Primordius, Mordremoth, or Suwan's weapons, or Oreen's weapons, whatever that may be.
I think that the idea of it, the concept of it, would just flow perfectly. Like that, if I had to put money and say that would be the one that would make the most sense if we were just going to do a single extra profession. just
Right.
because it would make sense with where the story is currently, and kind of like the wrap up of End of Dragons, and it's kind of like, you know, the very like solemn journey that we've gone through as the commander. You know, we died in Path of Fire, and we met
Yeah, we
Grenth,
did.
and then we, you know, came
Well, we
back
didn't
and
meet Glenn, but
wait, what'd you say? Or not Grenth? What's his?
he wasn't there. We did meet one of his messengers, but
There you go.
he'd already left.
Excuse me, the underworld. See, this is why I brought you here. Is correct me on the
Yeah.
lore. But it like, to me, that would make the most sense. So
That would be neat.
I mean, there's a ton of really good ideas, and I don't know if ArenaNet will ever actually act on any of them. Astral, I do appreciate you sitting down and talking with me, especially about the idea, the potential of these professions, because I really think that, I mean, there are obviously some winners, and ArenaNet, I really hope you pay attention to, because
I hope so.
we're
Yeah.
doing free marketing for you right now.
Right here.
So I do want to also point out that Astral does stream. He streams over on Twitch. The link will be in the description down below. He streams on Fridays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Time zones, of course, yeah.
But streams raid trainings, and I believe you're working on what's it, Overlook? You're doing Overlook challenge mode?
Yeah. KOCM, yeah, we've been at it for a while, unfortunately, but yeah, I think we're very close. We've been getting him down to like 15%, maybe 10% before wiping. So I think we'll be done with that probably this week, and then we'll move on to some other CMs. I think I'm really proud of my team here that's been working really hard to improve and learn all the different new mechanics for CM, but also just work on their DPS rotations a lot. They've really put their heart and soul into this.
Well, I do appreciate your time, and I do appreciate your knowledge. Make sure you follow Astral over on Twitch and catch him live. If you want to see the basic description of every single class in Guild Wars 2, click this video here. Stay caffeinated, folks.